how does community opera bring about personal change? Whose change is it? Is it change that the opera company imposes on people? And what's the legacy of that transformation? Do we just leave people to carry on with their lives, or do we offer them something to be involved with? What's the value of a large-scale community project compared to a more contained project in one school? They cost a lot of money. I don't know what the budget was for this one, and I don't know whether Nikki's going to share the budget, but I know what the budgets were for the Glyndebourne projects, and the night crew was sort of nearing up to £500,000 when you look at all the staff costs. It's not a year-round operation, so you have to bring all your technical staff in. You've got the commission, you've got you putting something onto the main stage, so your set budget cannot be so small that it just disappears. It's got to be have an impact. And you've got to work with lots of repetitors, musicians who are going to work with the community to learn their work, and that will take many, many weeks, and that's professional cost. So you've got a lot of things to think about. So what's the value of putting all this investment in compared to maybe working with one school for 1 day a week, or over 1 week or 2 weeks? What does it bring? So there's sort of big versus small debate. So let's keep that in our mind. So some questions. So the first one I'd like to address to Nikki about, this is Garsington's first community opera. Why do you think it's important for Garsington to undertake this project? And maybe you could give us some idea of the time frame and how long ago you thought about doing it.
We, as you know, we moved here 3 years ago from Garsington Manor, and in fact we had talked about doing a community opera at Garsington. We had been running a programme with Karen for about 5 years there, hadn't we? And we felt that it was time to take on a project of that scale at Garsington. However, tragically, Leonard Ingram's died, and we were given 2 years notice to find a new home. And I think one of the wisest decisions I ever made was to say to Karen, I was terribly sorry, we'd already started talking about the themes and things that we might be shaping around the community opera, but we can't do it the same, in the year that we're leaving Garsington. So we put the whole thing on hold, and we very much said, this is not saying goodbye to this idea, but we'll take it wherever, to our new home. So we then came here, and with Gemma's help, Gemma Baxter, our education manager, we started knocking on doors and trying to establish relationships with different partners around this area, because we've always felt that our education programme was very much from the with us at the centre and then going out from there. So we wanted to involve local people. And we felt that after a couple of years, we were beginning to establish sufficient relationships with the local schools and community groups that we would be able to work with those people to make a large-scale project. We also felt that it was a springboard for us to become better known locally, because we come into actually, although we've only come 17 miles as the crow flies, as the kites fly, it's actually a very, very different local set of networks around here. So we had to establish those networks before we could start doing that, but we then felt that by doing something that was big and obviously got a lot of local publicity through radio and the local papers and so on, and so we were able to start people saying, oh yes, Garsington's down the road, it's now moved to Wormsley, with a lot of local people who perhaps otherwise wouldn't be talking about us, whereas our friends of the Garsington Opera had come and they were already sort of entrenched with us here. So that's kind of why we felt, didn't we, that it was the first possible opportunity that we could have done it, our third year here. If anything, it was possibly a year too soon, but it made us, get on and start knocking on more doors. But that was good. So we felt that a large-scale project would be exciting, and we have here the most amazing opera house, and I hope that anybody who hasn't yet been in will have an opportunity, do go and have a look at the end. And I'm very happy to take people in if you haven't already been to see it inside. But we're very, very lucky to have that opera house. And at Old Garsington, we had a very strict limit on the number of performances that we were allowed with the district council because of the local residents. So we could never put any production on the main stage because we just didn't have the time allowed. Whereas here we have, thanks to the lovely local district council, and we can put on as many performances basically as we can afford. And that enabled us to put to give the fully professional team, like you were saying, all the technical staff, all the wardrobe, wigs, everything, were here to support it and to give them the most amazing experience. So I think, does that cover it?
Yeah.
The size of it, we thought we would aim, off the top of our heads really, we thought we would aim at 140 in the cast. And we deliberately had no auditions, and we thought that we might get an adult group of about 40.
40, yeah.
And we couldn't stop them coming in, which was absolutely great. And we ended up with over 70 adults. We thought we'd have a group of 40 or so primary, and we ended up with 80. Did we?
Yes.
So again, we just couldn't bear to say no, and we knew that the costume budget was kind of being squeezed a bit, but it was just so exciting to have such a positive response to everything, and actually the people we had to work with, it's really lovely to have two of our teenage chorus here with us today. But is it 2 or 3?
Yes, 2.
Yeah,
Claire and Joe.
And we it was lovely that they all came independently. We didn't work with the school to get a group of teenagers together, but we had a group of 25 or so teenagers who all came very, very independently from all sorts of different schools locally. So we ended up with 180.
And how important was audience development in your ideas about this piece?
I think it goes deeper than that. It goes in, we're all here, I think, passionate about spreading the good word of what opera is, and that everybody can enjoy and get involved with opera. And so our deeper purpose was to say, this is what opera is, rather than sort of too cut and dried about we'd love them all to become our audience, but we want them to hear about what opera is, more importantly, I think.
So what you were saying about Garsington as part of its community being the main driver for Road Rage.
Yeah.
Right. So we have 2 members of the creative team here. Karen Gillingham, creative director, and Richard Stilgo, the librettist. I wanted to ask you about your particular journeys. And first of all, I think to Richard, what were the challenges for you as the writer of such a project? Were you given a blank piece of paper?
Yes. The worst thing you can possibly have is a blank sheet of paper. And the first thing you have to do, advice to young writers, is write something on it so that it isn't a blank sheet of paper and it's slightly less frightening. We quite obviously thought, right, what is the big local issue? Same local issue that they've been talking about at the Labour Party conference, that HS2 obviously is going to cut through Buckinghamshire. So originally we thought, hey, let us look at that through the ages. Let us look at what happens to a community if you build a Roman road through it, or in the 18th century if you build a canal through it, in the 19th century build a railway through it, 20th century build a motorway through it, and then now another railway. And that was almost the last time we had any ideas. From then on, we took that idea to the community groups who were going to be in it, the schools who were going to be in it, and said, what do you think about this? Would it be a good idea? What would your reaction be if they were going to build something through your village? And that was really, really interesting, because what we thought we were going to write changed immediately at that point. Because I'm a child of the 60s, Orlando is a child of the 70s, and we come from an age of protest. And there was absolutely nobody in the community we spoke to, or in the schools, who thought there would be any value at all in protesting against this. Everybody said, no, the government has already decided on that, there's nothing we can do, and in any case it will interfere with my GCSE coursework. And I promise you that last line is absolutely, from a teenager, that is the most depressing line to hear. When your life is going to be changed and all you're worried about is your GCSE coursework. So the piece that we wrote as a result changed hugely from that. It still had protest in it, but the protest had to come from outside and be brought in and kind of imposed on the community. There were, of course, people who said, no, it's going through my granny's back garden, and yes, we mind about that. But it was a completely different piece from what would otherwise have been written. On a broader thing, for me, the real excitement is being here over the 2 days that it was performed, seeing the faces of the people performing it, listening to the piece, listening to the effort that they put in, but also watching the audience and feeling the audience. I've been here lots. I've been to the opera lots, gosh, since I was 10, and saw Britain's first community opera, which was The Little Sweep.
Oh, yes.
I think even before, and in that, where we all had to learn a chorus, which we all had in the audience in Liverpool, we all had to sing Sweep, and a Britain chorus. It wasn't much more difficult than that. And I've been in love with the opera ever since, but I've also, every time I've been aware of what a very strange thing this is to go to. That you dress up smart, and so straight away by dressing up smart, you exclude yourself from the rest of the world. You go and watch something quite often in a foreign language. You sit there and you exult in it in a seat that has been half paid for by people you're never going to meet who don't want to go to the opera. And indeed, one of the main reasons I'm not chair of the Arts Council is I could not justify the Arts Council paying enormous quantities of money to opera companies so that hedge fund managers can pay 150 quid instead of 300. And I will never understand that. But luckily, there are opera houses, because otherwise we couldn't do community operas in them. And community operas are the one thing that really validates the form. Because, for heaven's sake, I've spent my professional life on stages trying to engage with audiences. You never see the level of engagement that we had during Road Rage between that audience and that stage, and the number of children in the audience leaning forward and enjoying the whole thing, because very often they knew somebody on the stage. Hardly anybody was dressed up smart. Everybody had brought a picnic. It was a wonderful piece of big society, and as far removed from the ordinary operatic experience that you could possibly have. And I just admire the whole form, the whole ambition of that for every opera company, for every theatre company. Because I don't know, I hope that for everybody who was in it, it's something that they will never ever forget. I also hope that it's something that they will keep doing, and not just do again in 2 years' time, if we do another one in 2 years' time, or another one somewhere else. The best thing that could happen is that people who were in it have said, oh, shall we meet on Tuesdays and do some singing? Without any of us doing anything about it, with that growing from the community itself. And maybe it's part of our job, as the centre where this happened, to encourage that to be happening. Some of you will, all of you will be Radio 4 listeners looking at you. I was listening in the car on my way up here, and there was Claire Balding doing one of her endless walks. And she was with a chorus of terrific women, a group of singers. Some of you will have heard it this afternoon. And the excellent woman running the chorus said, we do singing because singing is, well, it's just good for you. It releases the same endorphins as sex and chocolate without being so messy and expensive. And that seemed to be a very good mantra to have. Yes, write it down, absolutely. One of the things that everybody has done by being in this is do a bit of singing which they hadn't done since they were at school. And that is just so good for everybody and so releasing. But it needs to keep going all the time. Sorry, I've gone on for ages.
Don't worry. Thank you, Richard. Actually, before we bring in Karen, could I just introduce Lee Cornthwaite, who was the vocal director on Road Rage? Oh, and Gwyn the repetitor. Wyn, hello. Sorry, Wyn. And Lee, can you talk a bit about the challenges of working with the community and your role as vocal director?
I guess it's like everything where you start with people who are not professionals, singing professionals. It's just a case of going with the sort of the slowest pace of the slowest person there, really, and at the same time trying not to alienate people who may be amazing sight readers and have done loads and loads of community work, so or even semi-professional. You know, you get all sorts of people in a community chorus. So from my point of view, I think it's just treading a line between serving the music that we've been given to get that ready for stage, but also to make people go away from each session thinking, I enjoyed that, I want to come back next week. And the worst possible outcome for me would be for someone to go away from a session thinking, I'm not good enough to do that. So I don't know, really, I guess one of the things that we have to do as community music people is just be really sensitive to the people who are singing, I think, really. And and just make sure that everyone is able to enter into the spirit of the piece at their own pace, within reason, obviously, because you've got a schedule to meet, and also at their own level. And whether that means lots of repetition, often does, or whether it means giving someone the score to send them away to have a bit of a look at it, it's a mixed bag. But I think everyone needs to come out of it with that feeling of I've succeeded at doing what I set out to succeed, and B, I've found either that my enjoyment of singing is intact because I sing anyway, or I've not sung since I was at school and I really enjoyed it and I want to go and do it again. As Richard says, that's what I think we need to get out of it.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that struck me when I came to see unfortunately I could only see the dress rehearsal, but I was really struck by everyone's commitment to the singing and how good the diction was, and that I could hear such a lot of the words, and I could imagine that was, I mean, knowing, having sat in many rehearsals for community operas, that's the one thing. It's like words, shout words, you know, all the time. But I thought the storytelling and all the words came over incredibly well. So, and you must have had a good length of rehearsal time, I would imagine, to...
Not as much as you think, really, because it was quite a complicated plot, and the way people came in and out of the story meant that actually you couldn't separate people out and say, okay, we need you for this amount. Everyone had to be there for quite a lot of it, so it was quite difficult in that respect. But the reason I think probably that you got a good sense of the text, and obviously there was lots of the interest was in the text that Richard wrote, so it needed to be clear, was that it wasn't just about, because I've worked with Karen a fair bit, and one of the things we both agree that is important, and that's different from opera and just singing, is that you have to approach the singing is to get the story out, and the emotional approach that you have, the thought process that you have as a singer is about the story. And I think if you're clear with the story and with what your story you're trying to tell, you don't need to sit there shouting words, because that thought process means it's very clear what the intention of people is. And there is a little bit of technical stuff about ends of words, and there always will be, even for professionals. You know, some of them have got terrible, shocking diction. But, well, it's true. But I think that's how I'd like to approach it like that. And I think, I don't know if the chorus members in the room would agree with that's the way to go forward. It is much clearer then, I think. Once you've got your intention, you know what you're saying and why you're saying it. I think it becomes much clearer.
Would any of the chorus like to chip in now and talk about that experience?
No, he's right. Like every time we did a rehearsal, Lee would always say, "What does the text mean? What does the text mean?" And we'd have to do face exercises to make doing those really helped us to understand what the text meant. Because then one thing we used to do when we sat down and were rehearsing the singing especially, we just used to sit there and look blank because we're thinking of the words and we have to remember the tune, and it was just really good the way that we approached everything, and we were learning step by step what everything meant. So in the end it all came together really well instead of just bit by bit, if you know what I mean.
Thank you. This is Claire Deeds, who's a member of the youth chorus. So, no, thank you. That was really interesting. But I'm very interested to see what a face exercise, the motion.
I think it's probably a combination of two things, because obviously when you're warming up your voice, you need to warm up the muscles of your face as well. So there is all sorts of stuff to do with that. I imagine that's what they meant. But also, just actually on that point as well, is one of the things we do as everybody, unless you're used to knowing what your face is doing, most of us don't most of the time. If, as working as a singer or an actor, you work with a mirror quite a lot, so you know what you're doing, because we tend to think we're pulling the most outrageous faces when in fact we look like zombies most of the time. So that's part of it as well, I think.
Thank you. Sorry.
I was merely going to say that from my point of view, my only objection to that was that my pulled face should appear on page 5 of the programme.
Okay, we'll identify you later.